We are entrusting the day and the endeavor to the Lord. Let's go. Welcome to my channel where I visit many good books but live in the Bible. My name is Sarah Christine, and today I would like to talk about Ernest Cline's Ready Player One. I picked this up when I was in New York City and went to visit the Strand bookstore for the first time, which is legendary and amazing. If you are even passing through New York City, you should definitely go visit it. I thought it was amazing, and their air conditioning was not working the day I went, which means it was really amazing because if you know me, heat and I, we don't really agree. I'm melting! Now, I had heard of Ready Player One before, but I knew legitimately nothing about it except that it had something to do with video games, which would make me not the target audience for this at all. I think I can count on one hand the amount of video games that I was ever interested in. It would be Roller Coaster Tycoon, Virtual Villagers, Harvest Moon, and Faunasphere. RIP. If you know, you know. None of those were the kind of quest or combat video game that features heavily in this, and yet I still loved it. No lie, the first thing I did when I finished this was go all the way back to the beginning and start it again. Which I have to stress is cuckoo banana pants, because there were some things in this book that should have made me not just want to put it down, but chuck it, legitimately chuck it in the bin. Like, for instance, a long rumination at the very start of this about how science has disproven God and, all that rot. But in Ready Player One's defense, it was published in 2011 when the new atheists like Richard Dawkins were still riding high. Though, for the record, even Richard Dawkins admitted in a debate in 2017 with a triple doctorate and a Christian, Dr. John Lennox, that Dawkins's own reluctance to believe in God had less to do with the facts of math and science and more to do with the fact that Richard Dawkins did not want someone telling him what to do with his...
Ask me about my wiener!
I will link the full debate below with a timestamp so you can see this portion, but for our purposes, this is what Richard Dawkins said, and I quote, "You could possibly persuade me that there was some kind of creative force in the universe, some kind of physical, mathematical genius who created everything. You could possibly persuade me of that, but that is radically and fundamentally incompatible with the sort of God who cares about sin, a sort of God who cares about what you do with your genitals, or the sort of God who has the slightest interest in your private thoughts and wickedness." Yep, no physical mathematical genius is going to tell Richard Dawkins what to do with his... Which actually relates to the second thing in Ready Player One that should have made me be like, that is it. I am done, because within this text there is a short, mercifully short treatise on the merits of masturbation. High and chief among them being the claim on page 194 that Galileo, Newton, and Einstein never would have made their discoveries if they hadn't first been able to clear their heads by knocking a few protons off the old hydrogen atom. That had my eyes rolling to the sky. I was like, really, Ernest Cline? You are such a guy. Meanwhile, there's me who will go to the line on the fact that pornography is, and I don't use this word lightly, demonic. Get me started on that if you want a dissertation. But having acknowledged Ready Player One's godless penis preoccupation, I say again, I really enjoyed this. Despite all the exposition and the myriad of 80s pop culture references that I simply did not get, this was an immersive and a propulsive reading experience which had, surprisingly, more than a little heart behind it. In fact, there was actually a decent amount of yearning in Ready Player One, which was an interesting aspect given that the future dystopian world described within has become even more about instant gratification, even if it's virtual, than the world that we live in. To that end, what I would like to talk about today in greater depth are the 1, 2, 3 wants of Ready Player One. But first, I'm going to give a little bit more information about the premise for folks who have not read Ready Player One. Be warned, there are going to be spoilers ahead. In Ready Player One, we are in the head of Wade Watts, a teenager living in 2044, where conditions on planet Earth have deteriorated to the extent where most everybody is opting to live in virtual reality, logged into this online utopia known as the Oasis. Wade is a self-professed Oasis addict, and he has basically opted to live online, seeking reprieve from his pretty depressing orphan trailer park life. But the Oasis is not just an escape. It is also the arena for the world's most expansive video game / Easter egg hunt, where the prize is control of the whole Oasis, as well as a multi-billion-dollar inheritance. And when Wade becomes the first person in 5 years to find one of the hunt's 3 keys, something which the Oasis scoreboard conveniently announces to everybody, things get TNT level interesting, because that prize at the end is something that plenty of people are willing to kill to get. That's all I'm going to say about the premise. So if you have not read Ready Player One and you don't want to be spoiled, click off, go read it, come back, and then discuss with us the 1, 2, 3 wants of Ready Player One. Our first want is the want of egg hunt creator James Halliday, who also made the Oasis, but he created the hunt specifically because he wanted other people to share the obsessions that he had, to love the things that he loved, which was a lot of 80s stuff. Halliday's death was what inaugurated the egg hunt contest, with his will and testament being delivered by his Oasis avatar Anorak in a video message famously known as Anorak's Invitation. In it, Halliday promised everything he had to the person who found the egg and won the contest. Everything he had, that is, except his massive collection of coin-operated video games, which he left to his only friend and former business partner, Ogden Morrow, with whom he was sadly also estranged for the last 10 years of his life. That said, Morrow is still the person that all interviewers and reporters want to talk with when it comes to getting insights into James Halliday's life. And in one such interview after Halliday's death, Ogden is point blank asked, "Why do you think your friend made this contest?" And he replies on page 122, "I think Jim made that pretty obvious," Morrow replied, tapping a finger against his temple just as Halliday had in the Anorak's Invitation video. Jim always wanted everyone to share his obsessions, to love the same things that he loved. I think this contest is his way of giving the entire world an incentive to do just that. He did indeed, and Wade is just one of many egg hunters, or gunters as they are known, who has gone all in on James Halliday's obsessions. They scour Halliday's published journal entries known as Anorak's Almanac for hints as to what bits of 80s pop culture will be most relevant to the egg hunt. They give the distinction of canon to the films, the songs, and the games they think were his favorites, and they go as far as to memorize word for word all of them. This is page 61. Over the past 5 years, the Almanac had become my Bible. Like most books nowadays, it was only available in electronic format, but I'd wanted to be able to read the Almanac night and day, even during one of the Stax' frequent power outages. So I'd fixed up an old discarded laser printer and used it to print out a hard copy. I put it in an old 3-ring binder that I kept in my backpack and studied until I knew every word by heart. That may seem extreme, but if we flip back to page 7, we'll see not really, because, quote, the only thing that Anorak's Almanac seemed to indicate was that a familiarity with Halliday's various obsessions would be essential to finding the egg. This led to a global fascination with 1980s pop culture. 50 years after the decade had ended, the movies, music, games, and fashions of the 1980s were all the rage once again. Now, you may ask yourself, I know I did, like, why would this man want that? And we have to take for granted that Ogden Morrow is correct, that James Halliday did want everyone to share his obsessions and his loves, and that's why he created the contest. But if we assume that, we still have to answer the question, why would a person want that? I'll be so honest, I was not sure of the answer to that question until I got close to the end of the book, where it became very clear that for all his wealth and fame and creative dynamism, James Halliday was really very lonesome.
Mr. Lonely, I have nobody.
And not only because he was painfully awkward and really impatient with people who didn't share his interests, which on their own would have made socializing a challenge, but also because Halliday lost the only 2 people he loved in a stroke, his best friend Ogden Morrow and the girl he secretly loved, Kira Underwood. When Ogden and Kira got together, got married, and Halliday couldn't deal, he went from having 2 friends to having nil. When I read that portion, I was like, oof, that's sad. But also what came into my head was the Justin Bieber song Lonely, particularly the lines, "What if you had it all, but nobody to call? Maybe then you'd know me. because I've had everything, but no one's listening. And that's just really lonely. With Interact's invitation and the announcement of a multi-billion-dollar contest, James Halliday got people to listen to him real quick. And more than just listening to him, he got people to share his loves and his interest, which, according to none other than C.S. Lewis, is a catalyst for friendship. In his book, The Four Loves, C.S. Lewis writes, "Friendship arises when two or more of the companions discover that they have in common some insight or interest, or even taste, which the others do not share, and which till that moment each believed to be his own unique treasure or burden. The typical expression of opening friendship would be something like, 'What? You too? I thought I was the only one.' It is then that friendship is born, and instantly they stand together in an immense solitude." My guess is that Halliday wanted someone to stand with him in that immense solitude that he had felt from childhood all the way through to the end. And in the contest, he guaranteed that there would be people standing with him, sharing his loves, even after his death. But it does have to be said that dangling billions of dollars in front of people so that they will love what you love and be your friends is kind of sad. And it's even sadder because I think it reveals a layer of insecurity that is deeper still, which says the most I could hope for is that people would love what I love because there's no chance of them loving me. That's sad because while it's wonderful to love the same things as someone else, it's all the more wonderful when they love you as well. Personally, I felt that Halliday, as well as many other characters in Ready Player One, believed that no one could ever love them as they are, and therefore they want to change themselves. They want to become somebody else, which brings me to the second want of Ready Player One, which is wanting to be someone else. As I've already said, in the year 2044, things have gotten bad. There is an ongoing energy crisis, catastrophic climate change, disease, poverty, widespread famine, as well as half a dozen ongoing wars, which all combine to pretty much ensure that people do not want to live in the real world anymore. And that has been true for years. Early on page 18, Wade recounts how his mom used to have to force him to log out of the Oasis because, quote, "I never wanted to return to the real world because the real world sucked. I never blamed my mom for the way things were. She was a victim of fate and cruel circumstance like everyone else. Her generation had it the hardest. She'd been born into a world of plenty, then had to watch it all slowly vanish. More than anything, I remember feeling sorry for her. She was depressed all the time, and taking drugs seemed to be the only thing she truly enjoyed. Of course, they were what eventually killed her." There was a book published in 2020 by two economists that described deaths like Wade's mother's as deaths of despair. The three pillars of which are 1, fatal poisonings like opioid and drug overdoses, 2, intentional self-harm like suicide, and 3, alcohol-related liver diseases. All three of those pillars are the downstream effects of what Søren Kierkegaard called sickness unto death, which he also associates with despair, the deepest form of which Kierkegaard says is desiring, is wanting to be someone else. In his essay, Kierkegaard wrote, "This form of despair is in despair at not willing to be oneself, or still lower, in despair at not willing to be a self, or lowest of all, in despair at willing to be another than himself." And in the Oasis, people are given the means to gratify that despairing desire to be another at only the cost of a quarter. Page 59. At a time of drastic social and cultural upheaval, when most of the world's population longed for an escape from reality, the Oasis provided it in a form that was cheap, legal, safe, and not medically proven to be addictive. The ongoing energy crisis contributed greatly to the Oasis's runaway popularity. The skyrocketing cost of oil made airline and automobile travel too expensive for the average citizen, and the Oasis became the only getaway most people could afford. As the era of cheap, abundant energy drew to a close, poverty and unrest began to spread like a virus. Every day, more and more people had reason to seek solace inside Halliday and Morrow's virtual utopia. And more than just offering a change of scene, in the Oasis, you can be another. You can create a whole new identity. This is page 57. Halliday and Morrow refer to the Oasis as an open source reality, a malleable online universe that anyone could access via the internet using their existing home computer or video game console. You could log in and instantly escape the drudgery of your day-to-day life. You could create an entirely new persona for yourself with complete control over how you looked and sounded to others. In the Oasis, the fat could become thin, the ugly could become beautiful, and the shy extroverted, or vice versa. You could change your name, age, sex, race, height, weight, voice, hair color, and bone structure. Or you could cease being human altogether and become an ogre, elf, alien, or any other creature from literature, movies, or mythology. In the Oasis, you could become whomever and whatever you wanted to be. And Wade, overweight, nerdy, with teenage acne, has a good time making himself tall, muscular, and more appealing to the female of the species. He even gets a girlfriend, another egg hunter, Gunter, named Artemis, who Wade has had a crush on for years just from following her blog. When Wade meets Artemis, not in the flesh, but in the Oasis, he feels an instant connection with her that she seems to reciprocate. And before you know it, they're cruising around, going on virtual dates, and more or less neglecting their hunt for the egg, up until the point where Wade makes the mistake of telling Artemis how he feels about her. Page 186. I'm in love with you, Artie. She didn't respond at first. She just looked at me in shock as our avatars continued to drift in orbit around each other, moving on autopilot. Then she switched to a private voice channel so no one could eavesdrop on our conversation. You aren't in love with me, Z, she said. You don't even know me. Yes, I do, I insisted. I know you better than I've known anyone in my entire life. You only know what I want you to know. You only see what I want you to see. She placed a hand on her chest. This isn't my real body, Wade, or my real face. I don't care. I'm in love with your mind, with the person that you are. I couldn't care less about the packaging. You're just saying that, she said. There was an unsteadiness in her voice. Trust me, if I ever let you see me in person, you would be repulsed. Why do you say that? Because I'm hideously deformed, or I'm a paraplegic, or I'm actually 63 years old. Take your pick. I don't care if you're all three of those things. Tell me where to meet you, and I'll prove it. I'll get on a plane right now and fly to wherever you are. You know I will. She shook her head. You don't live in the real world, Z. From what you've told me, I don't think you ever have. You're like me. You live inside this illusion. She motioned to our virtual surroundings. You can't possibly know what real love is. Artemis more or less echoes that great group of modern philosophers, the Black Eyed Peas, and their song, Where is the Love, telling Wade, listen, buddy, if the truth is kept secret and swept under the rug or behind a VR headset, then you've never known truth. And if you've never known truth, then you've never known love. Wade doesn't know the truth, and Artemis does not believe that he could handle it if he did.
You can't handle the truth!
And without the truth, at least from Artemis's perspective, their love is moot. Therefore, she cuts off all contact with him, and Wade has to learn a further truth, which is you can't always get what you want. Unless, of course, you are a god, which brings us to the third and final want of Ready Player One, which is wanting to be a god. After Artemis blocks him, Wade goes into a bit of a tailspin and resolves to essentially quit reality and just live his whole life in the Oasis. Which frankly is not that surprising given the stark difference between his real life and his Oasis existence. This is page 198. Standing there under the bleak fluorescence of my tiny one-room apartment, there was no escaping the truth. In real life, I was nothing but an antisocial hermit, a recluse, a pale-skinned, pop-culture-obsessed geek, an agoraphobic shut-in with no real friends, family, or genuine human contact. I was just another sad, lost, lonely soul wasting his life on a glorified video game. But not in the Oasis. In there, I was the great Parzival, world-famous Gunter, an international celebrity. People asked for my autograph. I had a fan club, several, actually. I was recognized everywhere I went, but only when I wanted to be. I was paid to endorse products. People admired and looked up to me. I got invited to the most exclusive parties. I went to all the hippest clubs and never had to wait in line. I was a pop culture icon, a VR rock star, and in Gunter circles, I was a legend. Nay, a god.
I'm a god.
In the world of Ready Player One, being a god means having prowess and power, which Wade has because he was the first Gunter to get a hold of one of Halliday's keys. But Wade wants more. He doesn't just want one of the keys. He wants to win the contest completely because winning means, one, that Artemis will talk to him again, so #priorities. And 2, it will give him infinite power within the oasis, just like James Halliday had, who was described on page 52 as being a god among geeks, a nerd uber deity on the level of Gygax, Garriott, and Gates. Which to Wade sounds pretty great. I'm about to spoil the ending. When Wade's avatar Parzival and Halliday's avatar Anorak finally do meet, Wade gets what he's been wanting. Power level infinity. Page 363. "The game is over," Anorak said, as if he'd read my mind. "It's time for you to receive your prize." I looked down at his outstretched hand. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I took it. Cascading bolts of blue lightning erupted in the space between us, and their spiderweb tines enveloped us both, as if a surge of power were passing from his avatar into mine. When the lightning subsided, I saw that Anorak was no longer dressed in black wizard's robes. In fact, he no longer looked like Anorak at all. He was shorter, thinner, and somewhat less handsome. Now he looked like James Halliday, pale, middle-aged. He was dressed in worn jeans and a faded Space Invaders t-shirt. I looked down at my own avatar and discovered that I was now wearing Anorak's robes. Then I realized that the icons and readouts around the edge of my display had also changed. My stats were all completely maxed out, and I now had a list of spells, inherent powers, and magic items that seemed to scroll on forever. My avatar's level and hit point counters both had infinity symbols in front of them, and my credit readout now displayed a number 12 digits long. I was a multi-billionaire. "I'm entrusting the care of the oasis to you now, Parzival," Halliday said. "Your avatar is immortal and all-powerful. Whatever you want, all you have to do is wish for it. Pretty sweet, eh?" He leaned toward me and lowered his voice. "Do me a favor. Try and use your powers only for good, okay?" "Okay," I said in a voice that was barely a whisper. Parzival and Anorak's exchange was like blue lightning bolts in my brain, because around the same time that I had been reading Ready Player One, in my morning devotional, I had been reading 2 Chronicles 7, which opens with God sending fire down from heaven to consume a burnt offering, the first burnt offering at the temple that Solomon had just completed. And the fire descends, God's glory descends, and it's so powerful, so overwhelming that not even the priests can enter in. And we are told in 2 Chronicles Chapter 7, verse 3, that all the Israelites were watching the fire descend, and the glory of the Lord came on the temple. They bowed down on the pavement with their faces to the ground. They worshipped and praised the Lord. "For he is good," they said, "for his faithful love endures forever." When I read that, I was blown away, because I don't know about you, but I did think that after such a display, fireballs and glory from heaven is pretty cray, that the people should have been praising God's might. They should have been saying, "Hey, look at this God of infinite power and strength." But that's not what they say. They say, with their faces pressed to the ground before the Lord, that he is good, for his faithful love endures forever. Even after such a display, the distinguishing feature of God to his people is his goodness, not his power. And in Wade and Halliday's exchange, we get something of that sense, that it isn't having infinite power that's most important. It's goodness. And taking God as the gold standard of goodness, we can ask, how does God use his infinite power? And the answer is, he uses it to fulfill his promises. That's actually what King Solomon says verbatim in 2 Chronicles 6, 4, and 15. Right before the fireballs come down in 2 Chronicles 7, Solomon declares, "You, God, have fulfilled your promise by your power." That is what God chooses to do with his infinite power. He fulfills his promises. And that's true both in the Old Testament and the New, because if we zoom ahead to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 3 through 5, John the Baptist is in prison, and he sends a messenger to Jesus to ask, "Is it you? Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect somebody else?" And Jesus, instead of saying, "Yep, I'm the Messiah, don't sweat it, John," tells the messenger instead, "Tell John everything that you see and hear. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf here, the dead are raised, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And we might think, Jesus, it would have been more succinct if you had just said, yes, I'm the Messiah, it's me. But talk is cheap, and all of the miraculous displays of power in that list were prophesied in the Old Testament as being signs that God's promised Messiah would perform. So Jesus' response to John's question, are you the one? Are you the Messiah? Was, listen, John, you don't just have to take my word for it. You can look at what I am doing and what I have done. I am fulfilling God's promises by his power. I am performing the signs and wonders that only the Messiah can do. I am the promised one that has come, and I am making all things new. And if we zoom back all the way to Genesis, we can see that Jesus isn't just the fulfiller. He is the fulfillment of one of God's earliest promises, because after Adam and Eve ate the apple, God made a promise to the devil. He told the serpent in Genesis 3:14-15, because you have done this, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and one of her offspring, thus Jesus, will crush your head. And that is exactly what Jesus did in dying for our redemption and in rising so that we might live. Jesus pounded Satan into the pavement. 1 John 3:8 tells us that for this reason, the Son of God appeared, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Yeah, Satan's dominion of theft, murder, and destruction ended with Christ's crucifixion and his resurrection. Now we can say, like the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:54, that death is swallowed up in victory. Or if you're more musically minded, you can sing that wonderful song, In Christ Alone, and proclaim that as he stands in victory, since curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his and he is mine, bought with the precious blood of Christ. And we can say, no guilt in life, no fear in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man could ever pluck me from his hand till he returns or calls me home. Here in the power of Christ, I'll stand. And that is an infinite power, friends, greater even than anorex. So if you feel caught in a tailspin, lonely, despairing, and powerless, I pray that you would receive and believe in Jesus and experience not only the power, but the goodness of God through the enduring and faithful love of his Son. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this was edifying, encouraging, and entertaining, and I hope you will continue to join me as I visit many good books, but live in the Bible. Look at that light. Look at that. I feel like I'm being scanned on a spaceship. Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? I have lost all feeling in both my butt cheeks because I could not string words together today. Lord have mercy.